Final hour on a Libations Friday, loosey-goosey edition of the program. Bonus hour for you here, as it's still known. At least I'm always going to pigeonhole it as such. That way it allows for us to do it earlier in the day. That's how it works sometimes. That's the way schedules are. Anyhow, we're here. It's fresh. It's good to go. It's going to be a different one because I feel compelled after yesterday having forgotten to do so, rather irresponsible of me, to solve for the future. Although you could argue that's what these 3 hours do every day, guys. Every day, solving for the future, trying to get through it together. This segment, we will actually solve for the future thanks to our friends at ISF, giving you plenty of opportunities to talk about our collaboration and our friendship with ISF and the fine work that they do. Every time I go through the stuff that they did with the Department of Children and Families and the Department of State, and we've given you examples of process innovation with the healthcare industry, childcare food programs that they've worked with. This is a company that is right here in Tallahassee and works throughout the entire United States. And that includes with my friends at the Florida Guardian ad litem, who I was with last night, and we all met up. Thanks to everybody who came out. And for anybody that is perhaps volunteering or mentoring, whatever it might be, we appreciate you as well. ISF, Solving the Future, been going on now for a couple of years, and I love it. I'll have to get together with Jonathan here real soon. Here's what I want to do with today's Solving for the Future, and because I did not want to relitigate the talking point from the other day after the official launch of, and the video that accompanied with the Vision of Excellence Foundation. And yeah, duly noted, I commented at length about Mike's proclivity to say repeatedly. I didn't want to go back over that, but I did want to tell you about something that I find interesting, and it's a bigger picture discussion that we can have here. That seemed to be a trigger for a lot of people who have had a lot of things to say about whether or not Mike's going to make it. And here's what I mean by that. There was a huge uptick in the amount of communication I received from people after that segment. It's interesting. Some of it was meaning the segment from the other day in which we commented on Mike's public speaking and the inadequacies of that moment. Some of the people were like, hey, man, I think you're being nitpicky. Let it go. He's a football coach. But the vast majority of people, which I think is, by the way, overly dismissive of a football coach, but the vast majority of the people that commented had a lot to say about, they thought it was sort of representative of Mike's unsuredness. I don't know another way of saying it. How could he not be so shook as to have been profoundly changed by the experience of trying to put your best foot forward and failing, and trying to do a job in which you just received a raise to do and then failing that magnificently. And so for the people that are betting on Mike not being able to make this transformation, not winning, not getting it turned around, this seemed like more evidence to them that was true, that this is just a guy who's lost at sea and is not going to get it turned around. But Tom, I think you and I have discussed this before too, that even if that were true, that he was profoundly affected by the godforsaken season we just had, and maybe even second guessing himself and doubting deep down ways he doesn't want to show, but deep down wondering whether or not he can effectively lead again after seemingly being tuned out by his team a year ago, then he made the right moves. Like if that were true, or even somewhat true, even if aspects of it were true, he did the right thing. Because if you look at who he brought in a guy that he trusts implicitly and learned a ton from, and who has been a head coach more than once and has been in the game forever, calling plays, 19 plus years, all that stuff, right? So there's a guy, I've jokingly called it a father figure, if you will, running into the arms of and all that stuff. But it's somebody he does without question believe in and trust. And that's not a guy that wants to be a head coach. So you didn't bring in, think if you had brought in the guy from UNLV. If you'd brought that guy in who's auditioning for a head coaching job and doesn't run your offense. In fact, he's got a cutesy little nickname for his. And he's coming in here. You don't know him from Adam. Well, you know him a little bit, but not real well.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be the same thing.
No, not at all. You would still have to govern every aspect of the football operation. And I think you would be, even though Brendan Marion would get the keys to the offense, I think you'd be in that offensive meeting room to make sure that your guiding hand is taking it where it needs to go. But you can delegate and be hands off with the offense if you need to be, and you need to focus elsewhere with Gus Malzahn.
You hit the key word, Tom, delegation. If you're doubting yourself a little bit, you better be able to delegate to people who you trust implicitly. And he just did it with Malzahn, and I think he did it with the Tony White hire. I think he 100% did it with the Tony White hire. I think Tony White's about to be a head coach, and soon. Now, there's another discussion to be had, and that is that Tony White could be Florida State's next head coach. He may be on the roster. He may be on the payroll currently, but that's a different talking point than I want to make right now. He brought in a guy that is as buttoned up and focused and a leader of men as you could possibly hire. It seems to me, based on that press conference and, of course, the results we've seen on the field from him as a DC.
Well, yeah, again, this is an operation that changes every minute, it seems like. The nature of how you need to govern a football program. The Title IX ruling that came down yesterday from the Department of Education, and we'll see how it fleshes out. But that's just another example in the long line of moments in the last calendar year in which the way NIL is structured and paid out, and the way you need to structure your organization to make sure that athletes are facilitated to the highest level, that you can get yeses on signing days and yeses out of the transfer portal, it is changing so often that you might have a binder and a full plan as a head coach of how you're going to work, only to see litigation or some sort of NCAA provision completely render the binder you built useless. And that's just this month that happened. It might have happened. You might have had 7 binders in the last year of how you're going to govern things. That takes so much time away from the coaching of the football, the recruiting of a team, that you can't do it all in this era more than any other. And we all knew that, and we've all been talking about that, but you're coming off a 2-10. So you got to put out fires, but you need people who have, an engine and a hose and some water to help you put out the fire. Probably a bad analogy with what's going on the West Coast right now, but you get the point. The program is in a very, very bad place, and you need as much help as you can with people who have the experience of how to manage those situations. Now, Tony White hasn't governed his own program, but you know who has seen the ups and the downs and is still, quote unquote, at the right hand of Mike Norvell? Odell Hagens. Odell has seen the pinnacle, and Odell has been the interim coach twice when things were falling apart. You don't think that's valuable to have that man in the room to help you in a crisis moment? I think it's very valuable. You combine that with Gus Malzahn and what Tony White is trying to create out of his own career, you've got yourself, as we said when all these hires were made, a very nice inner circle to be able to deal with major things. And if Mike is overwhelmed by any number of things like NIL stuff, he can say, hey, Gus, what do you think about handling this? And you know what? Gus has done it, and he's done it at a high level. Does it mean it's all going to work for him? I don't know. But I like this situation much, much better than having 2 young coordinators come in who are better on the recruiting trail. I'd rather have steadying forces at coordinators who can handle an entire football operation in a pinch if they need to, because he's going to be pulled in a lot of different directions. He's also got to fundraise a hell of a lot more this year because they were so bad. That's why at least I was harping.
Well, yes, because he's got to be more buttoned up. Sure, absolutely. There's no doubt. Yeah.
When times are tough, your sales pitch has to be better. When times are tough, you have to be more compelling to get people to part with and overcome their own doubts.
And
he might be having doubts about his ability to run the program, but people have doubts about whether or not they're going to be making the drive from Orlando, Miami, or Tampa, or even Jacksonville to come to games this year. You got to talk them through that, and that's where you need to be ready and effective.
You got to talk them through it, and you have to do so effectively and concisely. You have to have a game plan. You have to appear to be certainly confidence, rooted in strength, and believe what you're doing is going to get the results that everybody wants. They have to believe that from you. And even though this segment is called Solving for the Future, it does not predict the future. We cannot tell you that all of this is going to work. We are saying the moves that needed to be made, because I think it strikes a nice balance. I think it strikes a real good balance of innovation, strength on the defensive side of the football with a guy that just got done doing it at a very high level in the Big Ten, right? Who has succeeded multiple places in Power Four conferences, like he did it at Syracuse, he did it here. This is a guy that is upwardly mobile, is tracking in the right direction, and seems to be, at the very least, intense and focused and knowing what he wants to get out of his unit, out of this football program, out of this defensive, out of his defensive coordinators and assistants, I should say. So I think there's a game plan there. And on the other hand, you have to have surrounded yourself with people that you absolutely know and can sit down and talk man-to-man with and have a background shared. So Odell does that, as you're saying, but does it in a different role now. And then so does, obviously, you Gus Malzahn, you got a guy that you absolutely trust. So that will be helpful as well. And there's enough familiarity as well. So that it worked in well.
Well, you can't stop learning no matter what level you're at. You can't stop wanting to learn, yearning to learn. And in this case, I think if people detect unsteadiness from Mike, that speaks to how sure he was that it was going to work last year.
Right.
And then it didn't. And so you second guess yourself when you believe something is going to happen, and then the opposite does. Because how did I believe that? How did I think that was going to be true? And then the opposite came to be. Where did I go wrong? And what you have in these hires that he made, I think at least, from just a very basic day-to-day operational perspective, you have in Gus Malzahn and Tony White excellent BS detectors. And I'm not talking about looking up. I'm talking about looking down at the players.
Mm-hmm.
You're assessing your players, and for me, the number one thing I'd want out of Coach Storms and all my assistant coaches this offseason is, if there is a problem, it cannot fester the way it did last year. If there is an effort issue, if there's, the guys are at meetings, but we don't feel they're engaged the way they need to be. When Mike went to the press and said that you guys need to be doing more on your own time, and I'm challenging guys to do that, there could be a conversation that happens in January, February, or March that nips that in the bud. And you brought in some new eyes, people with their own bona fides, to tell you that we've got an issue here, Coach. He's brought in very nice checks and balances instead of a situation where, I think, as you talked about an awful lot, all these guys that were on staff last year owed a lot to Mike Norvell. And so they were probably less willing to be combative or confront things. Then Gus will be able to confront something. Tony White will be able to confront something right away. Because they've got their own things. They're in different parts of their career where they don't have time. They have not arrived at Florida State. Gus is on the way down, and he's easing off, and Tony White is on the way up, and he can't afford to have this thing screw up as he is trying to land the next job. So that's why I like the way he's constructed this.
Well,
thing.
It's interesting too, by the way, just a note on the fan base in general, this entire offseason that we're about to embark on. People do not argue about things, or are not dedicated to arguing about things they have complete confidence in, right? Nobody argues and sits around and debates whether or not the sun's coming up tomorrow. Instead, they argue about things that they're not sure of, right? That's what usually happens. That's why you have these arguments about faith and politics. Nobody really knows for sure, and so they'll engage in top-of-the-line arguments and those things because they don't have complete confidence in that. And what you do have is sides of the argument that make sense both ways. I can see it both ways. We're not saying this is foolproof. It's not. But we are saying that let's document these changes. Let's talk about these changes. Let's debate amongst ourselves. Was this the right move? Did he make the right hires? What do we think will be born from this, whatever it might be? And that's healthy. I think that's fine. We're all along for the ride right now. We're all wondering, well, we'll see. I like this hire. I'm not so sure about this one. I like this guy. This makes some sense, but I don't know. Just like, I think we all were completely shook a year ago because we didn't see a possibility of 2-10 after 12-0.
And again, with the guys he had on staff last year, they amassed the streak that they had. They amassed the team that should have been in the Invitational. So you get credit for that. But was Adam Fuller going to be a finalist for the UCLA job? The way that Tony White was. Was Alex Atkins going to be a finalist for, I don't know, the next Big Ten job that comes open? In this case, you've put yourself in the best position. If you have a crisis of confidence, you need to be surrounded by confident people in order to help restore what you've lost. And I do think there has to be a crisis of confidence. I think that's what we're detecting here is I calculated, if I'm Mike Norvell, the offensive line is going to be the best I ever had. I trusted people that was going to be the case. We're going to run the football. Basically, the offense they're running this year with Gus, and we'll see if they can execute it, is the one they wanted to run last year. You brought in little guys with speed, or smallish guys with speed, and you brought in beef from the SEC, and you loaded up on running backs, Roydell Williams and Jalen Lucas to go along with the backs you already had. So you were going to be ground and pound, play action over the top with a guy with a cannon for an arm. Now, the difference this year is you have a mobile quarterback and not a statue of a quarterback, but the idea was the run is going to set up the shot plays. That's what Gus wants to do. But you got it so wrong that you thought the running game was going to be the identity of the football team that I'm sure it's only natural that you have to second guess yourself.
Oh, yeah.
In a situation like that. But now you bring in people who have their own established self-confidence, and your job is to hit the ground running, make their jobs easier, and then make the money for the university and go fundraise your ass off between now and the fall.
Go be, and you're lucky you get to do it. The circumstances worked out in this way. Go be the CEO. That you don't have to put together anything. Go be the guy this is why you have to do a better job of talking publicly. Because you're now the CEO. You're going around fundraising. You're instilling confidence in the fan base. You're getting people to believe. You're doing all those things. If you can't succinctly state why they should be those things or do those things, you're going to have a hard time getting others to come along for the ride. You went out and got guys to run the stuff that you were running a year ago. Let them run it.
Look, man, this is where the conversation we had earlier this week is fair. You've got two dates next month that are on the books already for the Seminole Boosters Tour. Saturday, February 8th, they're in Orlando. And then Monday the 10th, they're in Pensacola. Does the booster call that happened earlier this week make people more likely or less likely to buy tickets to go see Mike Norvell? That's where the impact can be felt. You want butts and seats at those two events so you can glad hand, and you have the main event, but I'm sure there's a VIP event behind the scenes as well, in the side room, in the ballroom, where you say, thank you very much for being a Bowden Society member. Can I trouble you for another $15,000 tonight? Thank you very much. Outstanding. Those virtual meetings, everything you do is going to put more butts and seats for those booster events. So that hopefully he bounces back.
Chef Cameron Show 93.3, Real Talk Radio, and Warchant TV. More in a moment. We were just talking about will he, won't he, what's going to work? Was it a good, was it a good hire? Did he insulate himself, protect himself, put himself in a position to succeed? But I do say with a pretty high degree of confidence that it is going to be very hard to find too many dynastic programs moving forward with the rules the way they are currently. I don't know that you're going to be able to build stretches of dominance like we saw from Coach Bowden, like we saw from Nick Saban, like we saw at Ohio State even. I think it's going to be hard to have those kinds of runs because you won't have this stabilization within your program that is built around time spent together collectively building towards something. It's going to be very transactional. It's going to be very much a work in progress at all times. And that's going to be difficult. People are coming for your players at all times. And the second you have success with anybody, your roster gets rated. So what we should expect moving forward and what is sustainable is going to be very difficult to predict. Why do I say it? Well, there are question marks, for example, right now about the schools that surprised us this year. The biggest being, let's say, Indiana, right? So Indiana, do we think that at Indiana, Siggs is going to sustain a culture of 10, 11-win seasons? Like that kind of success is going to be possible at Indiana, where it's never, ever, 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 ever been possible to sustain success? Do we think that he's Midas? He's just got the golden touch. He's going to be able to do this no matter what. Or do we think he benefited greatly from the fact that he brought in 17 of his own players from James Madison, implemented the systems he ran there that they knew how to run, and then benefited greatly from the fact that they played a last place schedule out of the Big Ten and all the weakest teams in conference that you could possibly face? I mean, you accidentally won 8 games against horrible teams, right? I mean, that just doesn't seem sustainable.
They're barely inside the top 50 if you're looking at industry recruiting rankings for this class in 2025.
Going to have a very hard time sustaining this level of success. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But right now, he's the belle of the ball. And he just got a hefty raise, etc. And he's excited to stay at Indiana. We'll see if Indiana is a player again next year. We'll see if Indiana matters at all in college football a year or two from now. But this year, they were a great story. Here's another one. I like Kenny Dillingham just fine. I think he's wildly immature. He sometimes embarrasses himself with how immature he is, with his reactions to a referee's call or a question at a press conference or a moment in which he's frustrated. He routinely does things that I think a 10-year-older version of him is going to look back on and wish he hadn't. Doesn't matter, though. They won a bunch of games. And I bring this up because Arizona Board of Regents approving yesterday a contract extension for Dillingham through 2029 and a salary increase to $5.8 million starting this year with a $100,000 increase each January 1st for the duration of the term. He made $4 million last season. It includes a 1-year extension. It gives raises for certain benchmarks up to $450,000 if they can get to an 11-win season, all of that. He's 34 years old. He engineered one of the great turnarounds. Arizona State was 3-9 before that. They obviously surprised everybody by winning the Big 12. So right now, Kenny Dillingham seems to be a guy who knows how to press the right buttons. They did a lot of cool things. They won 6 straight games heading into the college football playoff, and they gave Texas a hell of a fight, right? Seems like a very stable set of circumstances for Arizona State to move forward and have success, or fall flat on their face and return to what they were just a year ago and go 4-8. I don't know. None of us do. He had a gazillion transfers that he brought in. Press the right buttons with those gazillion transfers, but by definition, this isn't born from some stable, steady climb of 3-4 years together, culminating with a great run the way it used to be. We're seeing this everywhere. I was asked a question last night at the event for the Guardian Ad Litem. What do we think college football looks like 4 and 5 years from now? And I said, well, I think the easiest predictor is right now is that it's going to look like professional football, which is to say there are teams every year who finish sub 500 and the following year make the playoffs. In fact, it just is a guarantee. I can bet on a lot of things to happen in the NFL next year. I'm going to bet a team that won a division this year won't next. A team that finished dead last in a division will finish over 500. I can predict this is the modern day NFL. It happens all the time. College football is going to be better resemble that in a way than it ever has. So I guess if you have to rebound from, again, what we talk about incessantly these days, you probably couldn't have a better opportunity to do so than right here, right now, just as if you were hired as a new head coach of a program that was in the doldrums, you couldn't have been hired at a better time than right now because of this thing called the transfer portal. So just as he utilized it to flip a team and a culture and win, saw it disappear, saw it rug pulled out from under him, let's see if he can do it again. There's lots of never seen this before in college football right now. And it's why we're so careful about declaring one way or the other that somebody is or is not dead in the water. Somebody is or is not a great coach, because when you win and go to the playoff, those sorts of descriptors are everywhere. Boy, Kenny Dillingham, one of the great young coaches. I feel like the Zen master. We'll see.
Well, yeah. Imagine if the NFL had NFL, had free agency every year. How great is any coach? How great is Andy Reid? right? I mean,
Yeah.
Kansas City wouldn't be where they are if Patrick Mahomes could go enter the portal every year. They just wouldn't.
Yes.
Chris Jones could enter the portal every year. I mean, Travis Kelce. I mean, at some point, they would take a deal and go elsewhere, and then you'd have to bring in a new tight end and a new quarterback and a new. I mean, if you apply it to the NFL, tell me that the same teams are going to be appearing in the playoffs every year. They're just not. So you have to be prepared for that in college until you have multi-year contracts and they run into the arms of collective bargaining, unionization, and employment status. If you can get there and multi-year contracts can have teeth coming out of high school, then you might have the consistency that we were accustomed to for decades.
Cornbread Hemp making organic THC gummies that are 100% legal. And some of you decided to perhaps engage in a dry January quest. Maybe you bit off more than you could chew. Maybe you're halfway through the month and you're all fidgety, freaking out, trying to get through this life, dead ass sober every day. It's very tough to do. But now you have an opportunity. Mellow out, chill out. You can do it with real THC, no synthetics, 100% legal hemp, fast and free shipping to boot, I might add. Jeff Cameron Show listeners, that's you guys. Hey, look, don't worry about it. You don't have to go as your default to alcohol anymore, whether you're doing dry January or just looking for a healthier way to relax, have a guilt-free good time. Got to try Cornbread's THC gummies right now. Jeff Cameron Show listeners can save 30% on their first order. Head to cornbreadhemp.com/warchant. Use code warchant at checkout. That's cornbreadhemp.com/warchant. Code warchant, Cornbread Hemp. This is the good life. It's the weekend. It's the weekend. You may want to drop you a gummy right now. 100% legal. Shipped to your house. Let's get the weekend started, gang. Wrapping it up. Jeff Cameron Show, 93.3 Real Talk Radio, Warchant TV in a moment. I'm still curious, wrapping it up, getting set for the weekend. Hopefully you guys enjoy the football. I know I'm going to. I have probably not, I shouldn't say this, but I do think that I have not had the same level of eager anticipation that I have sitting here today for a game that does not involve any team that I care about at all. Like I do currently for Buffalo and Baltimore. Like I can't, I'm intrigued by all the other games for their own reasons. And we've documented the storylines and those reasons. We've said, hey, like, listen, there's an element of surprise here for the Texans, a path for the Texans to make that a game against Kansas City. We recognize that Rams Eagles could be really interesting given that, Stafford's a Hall of Fame quarterback and that defense is playing really well right now, namely against the pass. But nonetheless, on the other side, Jalen Hurts is a guy that is not the most accurate passer in these playoffs. So you wonder, a couple errant throws. Like we could do this with all of the games, but that Baltimore Buffalo game is the one I think we all have the most amount of intrigue. Just kind of this is one where I wish it wasn't Sunday night because I would like to have a gathering for this game. I'd like us all get together, say at the corner pocket or at Bumpa's or Gordo's or whatever. We're all sitting around like, here we go. And then we gamble and we're all yelling at each other and play to play. Like this is a party game.
It is. The one thing I would say, as I have said, is enjoy it because it's going to go by quick. Both teams are going to run the clock. The NFL and CBS are going to do their damnedest to inject commercial breaks after kickoffs because this thing's going to fly by. It's going to fly by. And the moment that the game is decided might happen a hell of a lot quicker than you think. So if it's the first quarter and there's a 1st and goal from the 3, and now we get to 3rd and goal from the 8, that 3rd and goal from the 8 might very well be the difference in the game. If it's a touchdown or if it ends up being a field goal attempt. The one thing I'd say here, if you're going to pick if you're going to pick Buffalo, Justin Tucker has been pretty shaky this entire year to the point where he nearly could have been cut if he didn't have the resume that he had for the Hall of Fame resume at that leading into this season. But if they've got a 51-yarder with 4 minutes to go to put them up 3, does Harbaugh choose to kick in that situation or does he go for it? Because that weather is not conducive to kicking in that distance. Justin Tucker in any other year in his career, you would most certainly trot him out there to try the 51-yarder. I don't know that they do that in this situation. And when you're talking about fine margins, few possessions, efficiencies on third downs and red zones, advantage Bass and Buffalo in the kicking game. I know we don't like I know you don't like kickers, especially deciding football games, but advantage Buffalo in this game if it comes down to that.
By the way, it is kind of crazy. You bring up I meant to talk about this a while back. Justin Tucker, who, as you well know, for most of his career has been the best kicker of all time. Just an insane, field goal percentage for a career. As you have correctly pointed out, has been awful this year. But I think he's at 70% or something like that, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Yeah, and he'll miss an extra point now, and he'll miss a 37-yarder. It's not just because they're trying a bunch of 50-yarders.
Things that he's never done. I mean, not only did he not miss forever and a day and have the longest streak of made field goals in a row of all time at one point, he also sprinkled in that streak would be steady banging 57-yarders down the pipe like it was nothing. You'd be watching a Baltimore game like, oh, well, my man's going to go ahead and hit a 58er against the wind, right in equidistant between the posts. Like, what are we doing? And now they can't. Well, get this. Think about how good you are at your job and he's handsomely paid in a way that kickers typically aren't. Think about how good and for how long you've been good at your job. When folks in Baltimore, meaning management in Baltimore, went to Justin Tucker. I read this whole story in the Sun. This is crazy. Went to Tucker at his low point this year and said, listen, we're thinking about bringing in another kicker. And, of course, Justin Tucker was thinking he's on the verge of being cut, right? And they're saying, well, this is kind of untenable. We can't have you out here. I mean, this is dictating decisions, on the 50. Because we don't know what we can do or who we can trust anymore. So we're making kind of crazy decisions in the red zone too. And we just think we have to have somebody that's really reliable. But here's what we're proposing. This franchise feels indebted to you, feels committed to you in a way that, certainly I'll just say this, that very few kickers have ever been embraced in this manner. We'll keep you on the roster. We'll continue to pay you. Go get whatever help you need to get this straightened out. Go see who you need to see. Don't kick in a game for a little while. Get this worked out. Your mechanics, I don't know what's going on between your ears. Whatever it is, go figure it out. And the reason, and I didn't know this, the reason they did that, besides his unbelievable history, is that at some other point in his career in Baltimore, he had the yips. Now, it wasn't the yips as in a game, but apparently 1 year in camp and in preseason, he couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. He was just straight shanking everything, and it carried over. It was like one preseason game, next preseason game, and they're getting ready to go into the season. And they're like, my man is 1 for 9 or something insane, right? But they knew what a talent he was. And he said he needed a few days away from the team. And then he came back and he couldn't miss. Couldn't miss. He came back. He's like, I got it. I figured it out. It was mechanical. I'm good to go. Don't worry about it. You can put me in the game. And he promptly made like 20 in a row. And so they went, oh, okay. Well, he can fix himself then. Which, Tom, kind of speaks to like what we love about golf. Like you can watch a guy suddenly incapable of chipping. And he's one of the best short game players in the world. And all of a sudden you're like, Tiger Woods has literally got the yips chipping. The ball is rolling back to his feet. We watched it happen. Yep. And Tiger Woods has hands of gold. And we're just thinking, oh no, I don't like watching this. It'd be like watching Phil Mickelson incapable of pitching and chipping and, short game play. But he fixed it. Now he's back to being great when he does play at chipping. But that's how good Justin Tucker was. They're like, go fix yourself. We'll bring in a guy. We'll keep you on the roster. Nobody would do that.
Yeah, from 2016 to 2021, he missed 6 times. That's it, 6 times from 50-plus yards. This year alone, he's missed 5 times from 50-plus yards.
Yeah.
So again, the math is when you kick a longer field goal, you have to think twice. In fact, if you look at the last 2 seasons, this is a problem from distance for Justin Tucker over multi-seasons, 3 actually. But in the last 2 years, he's 7 for 16.
Yeah.
7 for 16 from 50-plus. In the last 3 years, he is 16 for 30 from 50 plus. So actually, he's been a Baltimore fan is probably watching this and said, wait a minute, he's been no good at kicking 50 plus yarders for 3 years. He's working off that reputation from the last decade. Y'all pipe down now. But the problem is, most years from 40 to 49, he's about perfect. He might miss you one a year. This year he's missed 3, and they've only tried 8 of them. And so I'm certain the way that Harbaugh manages a game too, they have turned down long field goal attempts, instead deciding to go for it on 4th down, or managing their play calling on 1st through 3rd down.
Sure.
To 4th and 2, so we don't have to worry about old Tucker over here, because we need to score touchdowns and we don't need to come away empty-handed on this drive.
The fun thing about this weekend is, and I did this last weekend, and people can, there are shows out there where you kind of look at a Monday after a weekend's worth of games, and everybody in the world will call that show an overreaction day. Okay, here comes my overreactions, and everybody will kind of like, here's what I think, those kinds of columns that people write and so forth. And it's a fun game because football fans everywhere do it. And then we look back and compare and contrast notes, and we talk about where we were, where our head was at after 4 weeks compared to 8 weeks, compared to 12 weeks. And I always, these days, because there's so much pressure on quarterbacks, it's just so much pressure on elite quarterbacks to cash it in. And there's no more pressure than the pressure right now that Josh Allen feels in Buffalo, or obviously Lamar in Baltimore, because those two, they are so good. They've done everything there is to do. And through, at times, certainly in the case, and I'm not, picking sides here, but I am saying in the case of Josh Allen, he currently has set the record for most playoff yards thrown for per game as a young quarterback in the playoffs. He's unreal. He's had 2 losses in the playoffs that had nothing to do with him. I mean, including one in which his team blows a lead after he drives them down on the road in Kansas City and played a perfect football game from the quarterback position, only to watch them not be able to hold on to said lead in 13 seconds. 13 seconds. So his narrative would be very different right now, because I think we both agree, had they won that game, Buffalo probably would have gone on to win the Super Bowl. Kansas City did. But the thing is, both quarterbacks have the unfortunate moniker of best to never have won a Super Bowl. And so we look at these guys in the playoffs, and it kind of defines their career a lot of times, fair or unfair. Last week was big for this, because I thought we could have sat down, and we did to some extent, say, well, let's have a discussion about where we're at with quarterback play. Do we suddenly have real concerns about Justin Herbert, who has, by the way, now been in the league 5-6 years and never won a playoff game, and also played as bad as you could play in this football game? Because I think there would be real reason to voice a concern about what you saw in that football game. And going into the weekend, well, hell, we can do this right now. We did it with Sam Darnold. I mean, the second we got done watching that game against the Rams, we went, oh, no.
Yeah,
done.
If you were to be ranking of the eight quarterbacks, who are the most poised? It's actually kind of fun, because most of them are. Like, most of them you would say yes, but to what degree do you trust the quarterback's poise in this moment? 1 through 8.
I bet it mirrors their overall ranking of where if you just ranked quarterbacks, period, on a list 1 through 8, I bet you it's going to mirror how we feel about their composure.
Yeah, from that perspective, you have an excellent weekend of football ahead, because CJ Stroud's in last. And you know what? When he's good, he's very good. But he's in last, and he should be, out of the 8 quarterbacks that are playing this weekend. I trust Jalen Hurts more than I trust CJ Stroud, because Jalen's going to lower the shoulder and lower the boom.
That's a tough debate. You're right. It's 7 and 8.
But Jalen does something that CJ doesn't, which is run you over. And
that is correct, and I will agree with you because of it. So I'm gonna rank those guys 7 and 8, but I think it's close. I certainly think CJ's a much better passer.
Of course, if it's 3rd and 16 and you need it, then Hurts is in 8th, and it's not close. But they call an offense. This isn't to the 2012 NFL. They call an offense around the strengths. The funny thing is, Jaden Daniels is climbing up that list rapidly.
He's probably 6th. He's probably 6th already.
He might be higher than that. There's something different about him and his calm demeanor.
If we're debating calmness, maybe, but if we're ranking quarterbacks, he's not ahead of Goff. He's not ahead of Lamar. He's not ahead of Josh. Nobody's ahead of Patrick Mahomes. So he would have to be,
It's him and Stafford for 5th and 6th probably, but I'm just saying, when we're looking for moments this weekend where are they rat trapping a little bit? Allen might, Lamar might, because of the magnitude of what they're trying to accomplish, and at some point the ghosts do provide an extra hurdle mentally for somebody to clear. I think that's why they're running Lamar more, so he doesn't have to think about the magnitude of what's going on. They ran him last week against Pittsburgh, even though he came up from 3 or 4 plays with his back in agony. And I'm thinking, stop it, guys. You're going to win without him running. And yet they called, I think, 3 zone reads in a row.
I think it's a fascinating discussion, Tom, because you've got me thinking now. I can make a compelling argument that Stafford's the second best quarterback on the list. Nobody from the pocket throws a better pass than him.
Well, but that's not quarterbacking anymore. That's part of the equation.
It is if you protect him.
But that's part of the equation. But now we have to think about the totality. I mean, you've got 3 guys in the playoffs right now that can run like crazy. And Mahomes turns into a different scrambler in the playoffs than he is in the
100% he does, and he's incredible, and he is number 1 on this list. I think it's a fun debate, though. I mean, if I've got an offensive line, I want Stafford. I mean, he throws frozen rope after frozen rope. He's not far removed from having just won the Super Bowl. He's a guy that, when you keep him upright, is lethal. Lethal.
It's the perfect reason to smile about where the NFL is as a sport.
Right, and you can have both, yeah.
And thank you, college, for
100%.
For forcing it down the NFL's throat that they have to adopt to not cookie cutter football.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
You're getting variety this weekend, and it's wonderful.
Well, it's fun. You know what's a fun discussion is, I think they're 2 entirely different discussions. There's 3 of them we just had. Who do you trust from a composure standpoint? Who's calm in the midst of chaos, right? Everybody, number 1 is Mahomes. It's just not even close. I mean, he's ridiculous. Dude finds ways to win games all the time that he shouldn't win. And he has more fourth quarter comebacks than any quarterback in history at his age. It's insane. He just did it this year. I think he's got 7. I read the other day that he has 7 this year, and the others combined have 6 combined. That's insane. So yeah, he does it all the time.
Well, Daniels has 3 or 4 this year.
Well, Daniels is, well, especially early, he was incredible. They didn't need him as much.
One of them's the Hail Mary, but still, I mean, he made the throw.
It counts, yeah. It's a weird one to count, but it does count. That's fascinating. I totally agree if we're having the debate that we're starting a franchise and I need a quarterback to lead my franchise. Oh, well, at that point, it's Mahomes, it's Allen, it's Lamar.
It's Daniels.
Yeah. At that point, though, it's those 4. Although I really like C.J. Stroud. I really do. He was so good last year. We're forgetting. They took a step back this year.
That plan they had last week was ass, and they got lucky. The Chargers should have been up 14-0 by the time that Houston figured it out, or more. They could have been up 17-0 by the time that Houston figured it out, but they weren't, and that's why the game became what it became.
And Houston's now got a huge problem because as of yesterday, Mixon had to leave practice with an ankle. If he doesn't play, they're effed. We just call this a day right now. We won't get our close game, Tom. That's the straw that stirs the drink. It's that.
That's why that game's the appetizer. Sometimes appetizers are the best part of the meal, and sometimes they're merely appetizers. And I'm just going to have one bite, and I'm going to leave the rest on the plate, and y'all fight over the rest of it.
Have a great weekend, kids. We'll be back with you on Tuesday, I believe it is, right? Tuesday is.
Might have a little pod action on a Monday, but yeah.
Pod action. Hey, now, it sounds dirty. We'll have a little pod action for you on Monday. Tuesday is Seminole headlines, and then we're back ready to gear up with the JCS on Wednesday, an official JCS, a pod and a show and a studio and a video and everything else. All right, that's it. That's all. Enjoy the football. Be good. Peace.